I made up my mind to swing by my wife's office one afternoon, just to surprise her at work, where she serves as Chief Executive Officer. Right there at the front entrance, a bold sign caught my eye that read, Authorized Personnel Only. When I told the security guard that I was married to the Chief Executive Officer, he let out a laugh and said, Sir, I see her husband here every single day. In fact, he is walking out right now. Instead of arguing, I chose to go along with it and see where things would lead. I am grateful you are here with me, and I hope you will stay until the very end of what I have to say. If you feel like it, share the name of the city where you are listening from, because I am curious how far this story might travel. I never imagined that one small surprise visit could tear apart everything I believed about my 28 years of marriage. My name is Gerald. I am 56 years old, and up until that Thursday afternoon in October, I truly believed I knew my wife, Lauren, better than any other person alive. The whole thing began as a harmless, even thoughtful idea. Lauren had been staying late at the office again, working those exhausting 12 and 14-hour days that come with running a company like Meridian Technologies as its chief executive officer. Night after night, I found myself cooking dinner for just one person, sitting alone at the kitchen table while she sent text messages about board meetings and urgent client problems. That particular morning, she rushed out the door without her usual cup of coffee, and I figured that bringing her favorite latte along with a sandwich I made myself might lift her spirits a little. The tall downtown office building sparkled in the crisp autumn sunshine when I pulled into the visitor parking lot. Over the years, I had only stepped into Lauren's workplace a few times. She often told me it was better to keep our home life separate from her professional world, and I respected that line she drew. Looking back now, I cannot help but wonder if I respected too many lines. I stepped through the glass doors with the coffee in one hand and the brown paper bag in the other, and I felt a strange nervousness settling in my chest. The lobby was all polished marble and shiny metal, the kind of place that feels powerful and cold at the same time, and it made me thankful for my small, quiet accounting office. Behind a large desk sat a security guard with a nameplate that read William. Good afternoon, I said, walking up to him with what I hoped looked like confidence. I am here to see Lauren Hutchkins. I am her husband, Gerald. William glanced up from his computer, and the polite look on his face slowly shifted into something harder to read. He leaned his head a little to the side and studied me carefully, almost like he was trying to solve a riddle. You said you are Mrs. Hutchkins's husband? He asked, and there was a clear note of confusion in his voice that made my stomach twist. Yes, that is correct. Gerald Hutchkins, I answered, lifting the bag slightly. I brought her some lunch. All at once, his expression changed. His eyebrows shot up, and then he did something that made my blood run cold. He laughed, not a polite little chuckle, but a full, puzzled laugh that echoed across the marble walls. Sir, I am sorry, but I see Mrs. Hutchkins's husband here every day. He left about 10 minutes ago. With easy confidence, William motioned toward the elevators. There he is now, coming back. I turned slowly and followed the direction of his hand. A tall man wearing a sharp charcoal suit walked confidently through the lobby. He looked younger than me, maybe in his mid-40s, and he carried himself like a man who belonged wherever he stood. His dark hair was styled perfectly, and his shoes were polished so well they nearly reflected the lights above. Everything about him spoke of success, control, and authority. He gave William a casual nod. Afternoon, Bill. Lauren asked me to grab those files from the car. No problem, Mr. Sterling. She is in her office. William replied. Frank Sterling. I recognized that name from Lauren's stories about work. He was the vice president who had joined Meridian Technologies 3 years earlier, a man she mentioned from time to time, always in a professional setting. It was always business with him. Frank did this. Frank handled that. Nothing personal, or at least that was what I believed. My hands went numb around the coffee cup, and the paper bag crumpled as I gripped it tighter without meaning to. I wanted to speak up and correct what had to be some terrible mistake, but my voice seemed to disappear completely. William looked back and forth between Frank and me, his face full of honest confusion. "I am sorry, sir, but are you certain you are Mrs. Hutchinson's husband? Because Mr. Sterling here is married to her." Those words hit me like solid punches to the chest. Married to her. Not was married. Not claims to be. Just a calm, simple statement that broke my world apart. Frank stopped walking when he realized we were talking about him. When our eyes met, I saw a flicker of something in his expression. It was not guilt. It was not shock. It was recognition. He knew exactly who I was. "Is there a problem?" Frank asked, his voice smooth and steady, like a man who was used to handling uncomfortable situations. In that moment, something cold moved through my mind. Every part of me wanted to shout, to demand answers, to make a scene worthy of the betrayal I felt rising inside. But another part of me, shaped by 20 years of reading clients and tough situations in my accounting practice, told me to stay calm and play along. "Oh, you must be Frank," I said, forcing my voice to stay level. "Lauren has mentioned you. I am Gerald, a friend of the family." The lie tasted bitter in my mouth, but it gave me a few seconds to gather myself. "I was just dropping off some documents for Lauren," I added. Frank's shoulders loosened a little, though his eyes stayed sharp and careful. "Ah, yes. Lauren has mentioned you as well," he replied. "Had she? And if she had, what exactly did she say?" "She is in meetings most of the afternoon, but I will make sure she receives whatever you brought." I handed him the coffee and sandwich, moving like a machine. "Just let her know Gerald stopped by," I said. "Of course," he answered, wearing a perfect professional smile, as though this strange exchange was the most ordinary thing in the world. I walked back to my car in a daze, barely aware of my own steps. The October air felt cold and sharp against my skin, yet I hardly noticed. The world around me looked unchanged from when I arrived half an hour earlier, but inside, everything had shifted beyond recognition. I sat behind the steering wheel and stared at the office building through the windshield. 20 years of marriage. 20 years of sharing a bed, a house, our hopes and fears, and private jokes no one else understood. 20 years of believing I knew my wife completely. My phone buzzed with a message from Lauren. "Running late again tonight. Do not wait up. Love you." Those words, which once brought comfort, now felt like another thread in a web of lies I had somehow failed to see. How long had this been happening? How many times had Frank been introduced as her husband while I sat at home cooking dinner for myself, trusting her stories about late meetings and business dinners? I started the car and drove home along streets I had known for decades, yet they suddenly felt unfamiliar. Our house stood just as it always had, the red brick colonial we bought when Lauren made partner at her previous firm. The garden she insisted on planting during our second year there still framed the front yard. The mailbox out front still carried both of our names in careful lettering. On the outside, nothing had changed. But now I understood that it might all have been built on deception. When I stepped inside, the silence felt wrong. It was not the warm quiet of a home waiting for its people. It felt empty, like a stage set prepared for a play. I moved through rooms filled with reminders of our life together, vacation photographs, wedding portraits, the ceramic bowl Lauren made in a pottery class 5 years earlier. I found myself wondering whether any of it had ever been real. I brewed a cup of tea and sat down at the kitchen table, staring into space. My mind replayed the scene in the office again and again, searching for some detail I might have misunderstood, some explanation that would make it all reasonable. But only one explanation truly fit, and I was not ready to face it. At 9:30 that night, the front door opened just like it had so many times before. Lauren's heels tapped across the hardwood floor, and her keys rattled as she placed them on the hallway table. They were the familiar sounds of an ordinary evening. Only now, nothing about my life felt ordinary anymore. "Gerald, I am home." Her voice floated in from the hallway with that same worn-out kindness I had gotten used to over the years. It was the sound of a woman who worked too hard but still cared enough to soften her tone when she spoke to her husband. She stepped into the kitchen doorway looking polished and powerful, dressed in a fitted navy suit that probably cost more than my first car. Even after a long day, her blonde hair sat perfectly in place, like nothing in the world could disturb it. "How was your day?" I asked her. The question came out automatically, the way it always did, like part of a script we had memorized after decades together. She let out a heavy breath and slipped off her jacket. "Exhausting. Meetings stacked one after another all afternoon. Did you already have dinner?" I asked. She gave a small nod. I kept my eyes on her face, searching for even the smallest crack in her expression, some hint that she knew I had been to her office earlier that day. I looked for guilt. I looked for panic. I looked for anything. There was nothing. She looked the same as always. Worn out. A little distracted. But happy to see me. Or at least she seemed that way. "I brought you coffee today," I said slowly, choosing each word with care. "I brought it to your office." Lauren froze for just a split second while reaching for a glass in the cabinet. It was quick. So quick most people would have missed it. But I did not miss it. Then she smiled. "You did? That is so sweet." I did not get any coffee. "I handed it to Frank and asked him to give it to you," I said. Another pause. Just a flicker. So brief I could have convinced myself it never happened. "Oh, Frank mentioned that someone stopped by," she replied casually. "I was in meetings all afternoon, back to back, so I probably missed it." She turned toward the refrigerator, her back now facing me. "That was thoughtful of you," she added. I watched her pour herself a glass of wine. Her hand did not shake. Not even a little. Either she was telling the truth, or she was the most skilled liar I had ever known. After 28 years of marriage, I was not sure which possibility scared me more. The rest of the evening unfolded like a strange play where we both knew our lines. We sat side by side and watched the news. We talked about what we might do over the weekend. We followed the same bedtime routine we had followed for decades. On the surface, everything looked normal. Underneath, something new and awful pulsed inside me like a second heartbeat. Later that night, as Lauren slept beside me, her breathing slow and steady, I stared up at the ceiling in the dark and let my mind wander to places I did not want to go. How many lies had I been living with without knowing it? How many times had she spent her day being Frank's wife, only to come home and slip right back into being mine without missing a beat? How long had I been sharing my life with someone who was living another life entirely when I was not around? The part of me that had always loved numbers started doing what it does best. Calculating. 3 years since Frank joined the company. 3 years of late nights. 3 years of business trips. How many times had she casually mentioned his name at the dinner table? How many small references had slowly trained me to accept his presence in her professional world, while he was actually filling a much more personal role? But the questions that kept me awake were not about dates or timelines. They were simpler than that. Who was the woman lying next to me? And who, exactly, had I been married to all these years? Morning came with a kind of cruel normalcy. Lauren leaned over and kissed my cheek before leaving for work. The same quick peck she had given me thousands of times before. She wore her favorite perfume, the one I bought her for Christmas 2 years earlier. The scent lingered in the air after she walked out. Everything about her felt familiar. Comfortable. Predictable. And yet, as I stood there, I realized I felt like I had just kissed a stranger. I called my office and told my assistant I would be working from home that day. In 15 years of running my accounting practice, I had never done that without a real reason. But that morning, I could not bring myself to sit across from clients and talk about tax returns and quarterly statements like nothing in my world had cracked open. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that slowly turned cold in my hands. Across the room, Lauren's coffee mug rested in the sink. She had used it that morning, just like always. I stared at it longer than I cared to admit. Had she been thinking about Frank while she drank from it? By noon, I found myself doing something I never imagined I would do. I began going through Lauren's things. Not in a wild panic. Not like some desperate man tearing through drawers. I moved carefully. Methodically. The same way I review financial statements. Calm. Precise. I started in her home office, at the desk where she sometimes worked in the evenings. The drawers held nothing suspicious. Just paperwork. Company letterhead. Business cards from clients whose names I recognized from her stories. Everything looked exactly how it should look for a chief executive officer who occasionally brought work home. And then I found something that made my stomach tighten. A restaurant receipt. It was from Chez Laurent, the French restaurant downtown where Lauren and I had celebrated our anniversary 3 years in a row. The date on the receipt was 6 weeks earlier. 2 people. $68.50. I remembered that evening clearly because she told me she was meeting a potential client. A woman from Portland who was in town for just one night. My hands trembled as I studied the paper. The time stamp read 8:15 in the evening. Lauren and I had spoken on the phone around 9:30 that night. She had sounded relaxed. Happy. She told me the meeting had gone well and that she felt confident about securing an important new account. I remember feeling proud of her. But this receipt did not look like a business dinner. There were no extra drinks you would order to entertain a client. No appetizers. No dessert to impress anyone. Just 2 entrees. And a bottle of wine. The kind of dinner I thought was reserved for us. My phone rang suddenly, pulling me out of my thoughts. Lauren's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, honey," I answered, surprised that my voice sounded steady. "Hey," she said. "I just wanted to check on you. You seemed a little off this morning." Her tone carried real concern. The same gentle attentiveness that made me fall in love with her 29 years ago. "I am just tired," I told her. "I did not sleep well." "Maybe you should actually take a break today," she suggested. "You have been working so hard lately." The irony almost made me laugh. While I had been pouring my energy into my small accounting practice, she had apparently been investing hers into maintaining 2 separate lives. "Actually," I said carefully, "I was thinking about that dinner you had with the client from Portland. The one about 6 weeks ago. How did that turn out?" There was a pause. Short. Subtle. But after 28 years of marriage, I knew her rhythms. I knew the way she breathed between sentences. She was thinking. No. She was calculating. "Oh, that one? It did not work out the way we hoped. She decided to hire a local firm instead." Lauren's tone stayed calm and easy, like she was talking about the weather. "Why do you ask?" she added. "I was just curious," I said. "You sounded pretty excited about it back then." "Well, that is business," she replied lightly. "Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose." I could hear the faint clicking of keys in the background. She was probably answering emails while speaking to me, juggling 5 things at once the way she always did. "I need to get back to preparing for this board meeting," she said. "I will see you tonight." "See you tonight," I answered. After the call ended, I just sat there at the kitchen table, staring at that restaurant receipt like it might confess something if I looked at it long enough. Either she had lied about the client, or she had lied about the dinner. No matter how I tried to rearrange it in my mind, one truth stayed the same. She had lied. The rest of that afternoon, I felt like a detective investigating his own life. I walked around my house seeing everything through a different lens, like I had been handed a new pair of glasses that revealed what had always been there. I pulled up our credit card statements, the same ones I used to glance at casually. Lauren handled most of our finances since she earned nearly 3 times what I did, and I had trusted her completely. Now I read every line. There were lunch charges on days she told me she packed a sandwich to save money. There were gasoline purchases in neighborhoods across town, nowhere near her office or any place she had ever mentioned. Then I saw a charge at Barnes & Noble for $37.12 on a Tuesday afternoon when she had supposedly been locked in back-to-back meetings. Lauren had not read a book for pleasure in years. She always said she was too drained after work and could only manage industry journals and trade publications. But the discovery that truly made my chest tighten came from her laptop. She had left it open on the kitchen counter. Lately, she had been doing that more often. I told myself I was just closing it to save the battery. That is what I told myself. But before I could shut the screen, I noticed a small notification in the corner. Frank Sterling had sent her a calendar invitation. I knew I should not click it. I understood I was stepping over a line. 24 hours earlier, the thought of invading her privacy like that would have disgusted me. But 24 hours earlier, I believed my wife was faithful. I clicked. It was a dinner reservation. Tonight. 7 o'clock. At Belcourt, the Italian restaurant that had become our place for anniversaries and birthdays. The same restaurant where I had proposed to Lauren 17 years ago. The reservation was under Frank's name. My chest tightened as I scrolled further down her calendar. There were lunch meetings with Frank that were not labeled as business. There were doctor appointments she had never told me about. There was a weekend spa retreat 3 months ago that she claimed was a leadership conference for female executives. And then I saw the entries that made me feel physically sick. Coffee with F every Tuesday at 8 in the morning. Dinner plans every other Thursday. Weekend planning scheduled for this Saturday, the same Saturday she told me she would be stuck at work. It was all there. A second life. Carefully planned. Neatly scheduled. Hidden in plain sight. Frank was not just a colleague. He was not even just an affair. According to that calendar, he was her main relationship. I was the afterthought. The obligation. The space she squeezed in between real plans. At 6:15, I heard the garage door rumble open. Lauren was home early, which almost never happened on a Thursday. I shut the laptop quickly, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Her heels clicked across the kitchen tile as she walked in. "You are home early," I said, praying my voice sounded steady. Then I really looked at her. She looked beautiful. It hit me like a punch. Her makeup had been refreshed. Her hair was styled perfectly. She was wearing the black dress I bought her for her birthday last year, the one she told me was too elegant for everyday wear. "For once I wrapped up early," she said, gliding past me toward the refrigerator. Her perfume trailed behind her. "I was thinking maybe we could go out for dinner tonight," she continued. "It has been forever since we did something spontaneous." The lie came out so smooth, so natural, that if I had not seen that calendar invitation, I might have believed her completely. I would have been thrilled. I would have rushed upstairs to change clothes, grateful for the sudden attention from my powerful, busy wife. "Where were you thinking?" I asked. "Oh, I am not sure," she said casually. "Maybe that new sushi place on 5th Street. Or we could try somewhere totally different." She was looking down at her phone while she talked, her fingers moving quickly across the screen. I watched her type. Was she texting Frank? Was she canceling their dinner? Postponing it? Or was this just part of some complicated performance I could not even begin to understand? Then she looked up at me with what appeared to be disappointment. "Actually," she said, "I just remembered I have that conference call with the Tokyo office. It completely slipped my mind." She gave a small shake of her head, like she was annoyed with herself. "Rain check?" "Of course," I replied automatically. But inside me, something cold and solid was forming. "What time is the call?" I asked. 7:30. It could run until 9 or even 10. You know how these international meetings can be. She was already heading toward the stairs, toward our bedroom where she kept her work clothes. "I will probably just grab something quick on my way back to the office," she added. I nodded. And I kept playing my role in this carefully constructed lie. "I will just fix myself something here," I said. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs and turned back toward me. The look on her face seemed warm, almost tender. "You are so understanding, Gerald. I honestly do not know what I would do without you." Those words should have filled me up. For years, they always had. But now they felt sharp and cold, like something digging into my chest. How many times had she said that to me while getting ready to spend the evening with another man? How many nights had I smiled, kissed her goodbye, and unknowingly sent her off to the life she really cared about? I stood there and listened as she walked up the stairs. I could hear drawers opening in our bedroom, hangers sliding along the closet rod. She was changing out of that black dress, maybe into something more professional for her so-called conference call. Or maybe into something meant for dinner with Frank. About 20 minutes later, she came back downstairs. Now she was wearing a navy blouse and dark slacks. Professional. Polished. Still attractive. Her makeup had been touched up. Her hair looked freshly adjusted. She did not look like a woman settling in for a long international phone meeting. She looked like someone preparing for an important evening out. "I will try not to be too late," she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. The same spot she kissed that morning. But it did not feel loving anymore. It felt like betrayal pressed against my skin. "Take your time," I replied. "I might head to bed early anyway." She picked up her purse, her laptop bag, her keys. It was a routine I had watched thousands of times. Only now I understood something I never had before. I was watching an actress leave one stage so she could step onto another. After she walked out, the house did not feel empty. It felt haunted. Every familiar object seemed to mock me with its fake comfort. The wedding pictures on the mantel. The souvenirs from vacations we once laughed about. The coffee table we chose together 10 years ago when we redecorated the living room. All of it was real. But none of it meant what I thought it meant. I made myself a sandwich and sat in front of the television, but the images on the screen blurred together. I could not focus. My mind kept circling the same painful questions. How long had this been happening? How had I missed it? And worst of all, had our whole marriage been a lie from the beginning, or did something change somewhere along the way? At 8:30, I found myself driving past Bellecourt. I told myself I was heading to the grocery store. That taking this route was no big deal. But when I saw Lauren's silver BMW in the parking lot, sitting right next to a dark Mercedes that I knew had to belong to Frank, the last fragile thread of hope inside me snapped. They were in there together. Right at that moment. Sharing the kind of dinner I believed belonged only to us. Was he telling her he loved her? Was she laughing at his jokes the way she used to laugh at mine? Were they planning a future that did not include me at all? I drove home in a fog. The weight of this new reality settled over me like a heavy winter coat I could not take off. My wife of 28 years was living a second life so complete, so smoothly blended into the first one, that I had never seen it. The woman I thought I knew better than anyone was a stranger. The marriage I believed was strong and steady was apparently just the cover story. But the hardest truth of all was this. I did not know how long I had been living inside this lie. And I had no idea what to do next. 3 days later, the next piece fell into place in the most ordinary way. I was cleaning out the junk drawer in the kitchen, something I did every few months to keep things organized, when my fingers closed around a key I did not recognize. It was brass, worn smooth along the edges. It hung from a keychain that read Harborview Apartments. I just stood there staring at it. We had owned our house outright for 8 years. Neither of us had any reason to have a key to an apartment. Especially not one located 30 minutes away from our neighborhood. That afternoon, while Lauren was at what she called a client presentation, I got in my car and drove to Harborview Apartments. The complex was nice. Upscale, but not flashy. The kind of place successful professionals might choose if they wanted privacy without attention. I parked in the visitor section and sat there with the key resting in my palm. I asked myself a simple question. Did I really want to know what door this opened? The answer came when I saw Frank's Mercedes pull into a numbered space. I watched him step out of the car carrying a grocery bag and what looked like dry cleaning slung over his arm. He moved like a man coming home. Not visiting. Home. When he disappeared into Building C, I waited exactly 10 minutes before I got out of my own car. My hands felt strangely steady as I walked up to apartment 214. The key slid into the lock like it had always belonged there. The door opened. And what I saw inside was not some temporary hideout. It was not a secret meeting place. It was a home. A fully furnished, lived-in home. There were framed photographs on the mantel. Books neatly arranged on the shelves. Lauren's favorite throw pillows placed carefully on a couch I had never seen before. But it was the photographs that broke me. There was Lauren and Frank at what looked like a company Christmas party. His arm wrapped around her waist in a way that was intimate. Possessive. There was another picture of the two of them on a beach I did not recognize, both of them tanned and relaxed, smiling like they did not have a single secret in the world. There was Lauren in a sundress I had never seen before. In one picture, Frank was kissing her cheek while she laughed, her head tilted back in pure happiness. Her left hand was clearly visible. No wedding ring. The same ring she wore every single day at home. I moved through that apartment slowly, like I did not fully belong there, like I was drifting through someone else's dream. But it was not a dream. It was evidence. And it was clear this was not some reckless affair that got out of control. This was a fully built second life. In the bedroom, Lauren's clothes hung neatly beside Frank's in the closet, like they had been sharing that space for years. Her perfume bottle sat on the dresser next to his cologne. In the bathroom, there were 2 toothbrushes resting in the same holder. Her contact lens solution stood beside the sink. And there, on the counter, was the expensive face cream she once told me was too costly to replace when she ran out 6 months earlier. Apparently it was not too expensive after all. Then I walked into the kitchen. That is where I found the thing that nearly brought me to my knees. On the counter sat a folder labeled Future Plans, in Lauren's handwriting. I opened it. Inside were printed house listings, all under Frank's name. There were glossy vacation brochures for trips she had never once mentioned to me. There was even a detailed business expansion plan for Meridian Technologies. In that document, Frank was listed as Chief Executive Officer, and Lauren as President. They were building a future together. And then I saw what was at the bottom of the folder. A consultation summary from Morrison and Associates, Family Law. I knew that name immediately. Morrison and Associates was the same firm that handled our will update 5 years ago. According to the paperwork, Lauren had met with them twice in the last 4 months. The subject? Divorce strategy for high-asset individuals. The document laid out her plan in cold, professional language. She intended to file for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and emotional abandonment. Her strategy involved creating a pattern of what the attorney called emotional unavailability on my part, supported by lifestyle incompatibility evidence. I read those words over and over. My preference for quiet evenings at home would be presented as social isolation. My pride in running a modest accounting practice would be described as a lack of ambition. My contentment with our comfortable but simple lifestyle would be reframed as an inability to support her professional growth. It was all there in black and white. But the part that truly made my hands shake was the timeline. Lauren had been planning this divorce for at least 2 years. For 2 years, she had been documenting moments she described as my withdrawn behavior. She had been constructing a story about our marriage, slowly shaping it into a narrative where I was the inadequate husband who drifted away emotionally, while I was loving her, trusting her, living beside her every day. She was building a case against me. I sank down onto their couch, surrounded by proof of a shared life that did not include me, and tried to take in the scale of what she had done. This was not just cheating. This was replacement. Frank had not simply taken my wife. He had stepped into my role. And somewhere along the way, I had been edited out. My phone buzzed in my hand. A text from Lauren. Running late tonight. Do not wait up. Love you. Love you. The same words she might have been typing from this very apartment. Maybe while Frank stood at that stove cooking dinner. Maybe while they were sitting together planning another vacation. How many times had she sent me loving messages while living a completely different truth? I took out my phone and started taking pictures. Every room. Every photograph. Every document in that folder. The legal paperwork. The house listings. The proof that this was not temporary. This was established. As I worked, something unexpected happened. A strange calm settled over me. For 3 days I had been trapped in confusion, stuck between suspicion and denial. Now there was no more guessing. The answers were right in front of me. They were painful. But they were clear. Lauren had not stumbled into an affair. She had orchestrated a long, careful transition from one life to another. And I had been playing the role of supportive husband while she quietly prepared my exit. For 28 years, I believed we were building a future together. In reality, she had been erasing me from hers. When I returned home, I found her laptop sitting open on the kitchen counter again. This time, I did not hesitate. I opened her email. What I found confirmed everything. There were messages between her and Frank discussing when to make the transition. There were emails to her attorney about how to prepare Gerald for the inevitable changes. Even messages to our mutual friends, gently preparing them for what she described as some difficult decisions I may need to make about my marriage. One email to her sister Sarah, sent just 2 weeks earlier, cut deeper than anything else. Gerald has been so distant lately. I think he might be going through some kind of midlife crisis, but he will not open up about it. I am trying to be patient, but I cannot sacrifice my own happiness forever. Frank believes I should consider all my options. As I sat there reading those messages, it hit me all at once. Lauren was not just living 2 lives. She had been rewriting the story of our marriage so she could walk away feeling justified. Every quiet night I spent reading a book while she worked on her laptop had been turned into proof that I was distant. Every time I encouraged her to chase her career goals, even when it meant long hours and less time together, had been twisted into evidence that I lacked passion. Every moment I chose to be supportive instead of demanding had somehow become a mark against me. That was the cruelest part. She had taken my patience, my understanding, my steady love, and reshaped them into flaws. When she started staying late at the office and traveling more, I told myself she was building something important. So I gave her space. When she seemed stressed or withdrawn, I tried not to pressure her. I thought I was being a good husband. When she suggested we needed to work on communication, I agreed to couples counseling without hesitation. I thought we were strengthening our marriage. Now I understood something that made my stomach turn. I had been handing her material. Every counseling session. Every thoughtful conversation. Every moment of self-reflection. She had been documenting it all. That night she walked in close to 11 o'clock, apologizing for being late because of client entertainment. She kissed my cheek like always and asked how my day went. For years that routine made me feel secure. Now I saw it clearly. It was maintenance. It was her way of keeping the illusion intact until she was ready to make her move. How was the client dinner? I asked, watching her carefully. Productive, I think, she replied smoothly. We are trying to secure this big contract, and sometimes that requires a little extra relationship building. She moved around the kitchen with ease, filling the kettle, preparing tea like nothing in the world was out of place. Frank was there too, of course. She added casually. He will manage the account if we land it. Frank was there too. Of course he was. I could not help but wonder if later that night, back at their apartment, they would laugh about this conversation while planning their future together. That is good, I said evenly. You and Frank seem to work well together. She paused, her cup hovering near her mouth. We do, she said, and there was a softness in her voice. He really understands the business side of things. That warmth used to belong to me. He has been essential to some of our biggest successes lately. She continued. I nodded like a man who did not know he was being replaced. Inside, my mind was racing. How much longer before she filed? How many more incidents did she need to document to support her case? How many more nights would I lie beside her while she quietly prepared to erase me? When I went to bed that night and listened to her steady breathing, I finally admitted something to myself. The woman I had married 28 years ago was gone. In her place was someone capable of maintaining this level of deception without flinching. Someone who could accept my love while planning my emotional and financial collapse. And the worst realization of all? I had been living beside a stranger for months, maybe even years, without suspecting a thing. The Lauren I built my life around had slowly been replaced by someone who could carry out this kind of calculated betrayal. The question was no longer whether my marriage was ending. The question was whether it had ever truly been what I believed it was. I chose Saturday morning for the confrontation. Lauren stood in our kitchen wearing the pale yellow robe I gave her 3 Christmases ago. She was sipping coffee from her favorite mug and scrolling through her phone. It looked like an ordinary, peaceful morning. Once upon a time, that scene would have filled me with quiet happiness. Now it felt like watching a show I no longer believed in. "We need to talk," I said, placing the folder of evidence on the kitchen table between us. She looked up. The moment she saw the documents, her expression shifted. The casual look disappeared, replaced by sharp focus. Her coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. For a split second, I thought I saw something unexpected in her eyes. Relief. "What is this about?" she asked. But there was no real confusion in her voice. She already knew. "I went to your apartment yesterday," I said. "The one at Harbor View." I sat down across from her and noticed how her posture changed. Her shoulders straightened. Her breathing became measured. "I used the key I found in our junk drawer." She set her mug down carefully. Deliberately. When she looked back at me, the mask was gone. The loving wife. The concerned partner. The woman apologizing for late nights. All of it disappeared. In front of me sat someone I barely recognized. Her eyes were steady. Cold. "I see," she said evenly. "How much do you know?" That question felt like a punch. There was no denial. No outrage. No attempt to pretend I was mistaken. Just a calm assessment of the damage. As if we were discussing a business complication. "Everything," I said. "The apartment. Frank. The divorce planning. The legal strategy. All of it." She nodded slowly, her fingers tapping lightly against the table in a rhythm I had seen during board meetings. She was calculating. Adjusting. Reworking the plan. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Since Thursday," I replied. "When I stopped by your office and the security guard told me he sees your husband every day." I leaned forward and searched her face for any trace of the woman I once loved. He was talking about Frank. For just a second, something that looked almost like amusement crossed Lauren's face. "Poor William," she said lightly. "He has always been a little too talkative." She picked up her coffee again like we were discussing a scheduling mix-up instead of the collapse of a 28-year marriage. "I suppose this complicates things." "Complicates things?" I felt my voice rising even though I was trying to keep it steady. "Lauren, we have been married for 20 years. You have been living with another man and planning a divorce behind my back, and all you can say is that this complicates things?" She let out a slow breath, and it sounded more like mild annoyance than heartbreak. "Gerald, let us not turn this into unnecessary drama. We both know this marriage has been over for a long time." "We both know," I repeated, staring at her. I searched her face for some trace of the woman who kissed me every morning, who texted me she loved me just days ago. "I did not know anything. I thought we were happy." She gave a short laugh, sharp and humorless. "Happy? Gerald, when was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time you showed real interest in my career, my goals, anything beyond your small accounting practice and your quiet evenings at home?" "I have always supported your career," I shot back. "I have always been proud of what you built." "You have been passive," she corrected, and her voice took on that cutting tone I had heard her use with struggling employees. You were content to let me carry the financial pressure, the social obligations, the responsibility of actually building a life worth something. You settled into your comfortable routine while I kept evolving. I grew. I changed. I needed more than you were ever willing to offer. Her words landed one after another, precise and deliberate, like she had rehearsed them. If you felt that way, I said, my throat tight, why did you not talk to me? Why did you not tell me what you needed? I did, Gerald. I tried, she replied. Every time I mentioned traveling more, expanding your practice, moving to a better neighborhood, you dismissed it. You were always satisfied with exactly what we had, even when I outgrew it. I tried to replay our past conversations in my head. There had been talks about travel, but I thought they were daydreams. She mentioned moving once or twice, but I assumed it was casual speculation. She teased me about growing my practice, and I took it as light-hearted banter. Now she was framing those moments as missed opportunities. So you replaced me, I said quietly. Instead of working through it with me, you found someone else. Her expression softened a little, but not with warmth. It was the look of someone explaining a simple concept to a student who was slow to understand. I did not set out to replace you, she said. When Frank joined the company 3 years ago, he was everything you are not. Ambitious. Driven. Focused on building something bigger than himself. At first it was just professional respect. Then we became friends. And eventually it became more. When? The word barely left my lips. When did it become more? She tilted her head slightly, as if reviewing a timeline. About 2 years ago. Frank had just closed his first major deal with us. We went out to celebrate. We ended up talking until 3 in the morning about our goals, the kind of life we wanted. It was the most stimulating conversation I had in years. You came home that night, I said slowly. You told me the client dinner ran late. It did, she answered evenly. In a way. Her tone was calm, detached, like she was describing someone else's story. That was the night I realized what had been missing. She continued. Frank listens when I talk about expanding internationally. He gets excited about the same opportunities that excite me. He wants to build something significant. Not just maintain a comfortable little life. And that justified lying to me for 2 years? I asked. For the first time, real emotion flashed across her face. But it was not guilt. It was irritation. I was not lying, she said sharply. I was protecting you from a truth you were not ready to accept. Our marriage was already over. You just refused to see it. Our marriage was over because you decided it was, I said. Because you found someone whose ambitions matched yours better than mine. No, she replied firmly. It was over because you stopped growing. Lauren stood up and walked toward the window, moving with that same smooth confidence that caught my attention almost 30 years ago when we first met. I kept hoping you would find some passion for something, she said, looking out at the yard. Anything beyond your routine. But you never did. You are the same man at 56 that you were at 36. I am not the same woman. I sat there staring at her profile in the soft morning light. And as much as her words cut into me, I could not deny there was truth buried in them. I had been satisfied with our life. I liked our quiet dinners. I liked our steady routine. I liked knowing what tomorrow would look like. While she dreamed about expansion and risk and bigger stages, I felt grateful for what we already had. So you and Frank have been planning to get rid of me, I said. She turned back around, her expression calm and professional. We have been planning our future, she corrected. The divorce was always going to be necessary. We just wanted to manage it in the least disruptive way possible. Least disruptive? I pulled the legal consultation summary from the folder and slid it toward her. You have been building a case against me for months. Emotional abandonment. Lifestyle incompatibility. You have been documenting my behavior so you could use it later. For the first time, she looked slightly uncomfortable. The legal advice was meant to protect both of us, she said. Divorce can become messy if people are not prepared. Protect both of us. I shook my head. You have been quietly damaging my reputation with our friends, making me sound like some inadequate husband who pushed you into someone else's arms. I have been honest about the condition of our marriage, she replied defensively. If that makes you uneasy, maybe you should ask yourself why. The way she twisted it made my head spin. She had lied. She had cheated. She had built an exit strategy behind my back. And somehow I was being encouraged to reflect on my shortcomings. It was such careful psychological maneuvering that for a moment I almost questioned my own memory. Do you love him? I asked. The question surprised even me. Her face softened, but not in a way that gave me hope. I do, she said plainly. I love Frank in a way I never loved you. He challenges me. He inspires me. He pushes me to become more than I am. With him, I feel alive instead of just comfortable. And with me? I asked. She looked at me for a long moment. Her gaze was not cruel. It was not kind either. It was simply honest. With you I felt safe, she said. Secure. Comfortable. For a long time I believed that was enough. But it is not, Gerald. I want more than safety. I let that sink in. 28 years of marriage. And what she valued most about me was that I made her feel secure. What I called love and partnership, she had experienced as limitation. What happens now? I asked. She sat down again, her posture loosening now that the emotional part was done. Now we handle this like adults, she said. I was planning to file next month. This just moves things up. Next month? Frank and I want to be married by Christmas, she said. We have been planning a small ceremony. Just immediate family. She paused, maybe realizing how harsh that sounded. I hoped we could make the transition smooth for everyone. Everyone except me, I said quietly. Gerald, you will be fine, she replied. You have your practice, your routines, the things you enjoy. You might even be happier without the pressure of trying to keep up with someone like me. The condescension in her voice stunned me. Even now, she framed this as though she were doing me a favor. As if my contentment had been some burden she carried out of generosity. I trusted you, I said. I know you did, she answered. And I am sorry it ends this way. But we both deserve partners who truly understand us. You deserve someone who appreciates your quiet strengths. I deserve someone who shares my ambition. In that moment, she reshaped our entire history into a simple mismatch. Not betrayal. Not deception. Just two incompatible people. It was almost impressive, the way she turned years of dishonesty into enlightened self-discovery. When do you want me to move out? I asked. She looked surprised. You do not need to leave immediately. We can let the attorneys work out the details. I am not heartless, Gerald. Not heartless. Just strategic. Just capable of living two lives at once. I stood up slowly. I felt older than 56. I will call a lawyer on Monday, I said. Gerald, she called as I reached the doorway. I turned. For a brief second, she almost looked like the woman I once believed she was. I truly am sorry it happened this way, she said. I never meant to hurt you. I searched her face for any sign she understood what she had done. But all I saw was mild regret, the kind someone might feel over a difficult business choice. No, I said quietly. You just wanted a replacement. The pain was incidental. I walked upstairs. As I reached the bedroom, I heard her voice downstairs on the phone. It sounded lighter. More animated. She was calling Frank. Letting him know the secret was out. Letting him know they could move forward. I sat on the edge of our bed and looked around the room. The life I believed in was gone. Either she had changed into someone else, or I had never truly known her at all. The man who woke up that morning believing in his marriage no longer existed. The next day, I would begin untangling 28 years of shared history. But that night, I allowed myself to grieve. Not only for the marriage, but for the version of myself who believed in it. On Monday morning, I found myself sitting across from David Morrison, the same attorney who helped us update our wills 5 years earlier. There was something bitterly ironic about that. Lauren had consulted his firm about divorcing me. Now I was asking for protection from her plan. "Gerald," David said after reviewing the documents I brought, "this is one of the most calculated divorce strategies I have seen in 30 years of practice. Your wife has been building this case carefully for a long time." I nodded while he flipped through the photos of the apartment, the legal consultation notes, and the documentation she had collected about me. "What are my options?" I asked. David leaned back in his chair, thinking. "The good news," he said, tapping the consultation summary, "is that her entire strategy depended on you being caught off guard. The fact that you discovered this before she filed changes the situation completely." He looked at me directly. "She planned to portray you as emotionally unavailable and financially irresponsible. But that narrative can be challenged." "How?" I asked David. "With facts," he said plainly. "You have been the steady, supportive spouse for 20 years. You have not cheated. You encouraged her career. You managed your shared finances responsibly." He gave me a tight, almost grim smile. "And more importantly, you have proof of her deception and adultery. Even in a no-fault state, that kind of behavior can still influence how a judge views asset division." For the next 2 hours, David laid everything out in practical, unemotional terms. Yes, Texas follows community property law. But adultery and financial misconduct can absolutely affect how assets are divided. And Lauren's careful documentation, meant to weaken me, could backfire if it showed manipulation. "There is something else," I said, sliding another folder across his desk. "I did some financial analysis this weekend." David raised an eyebrow as I spread out spreadsheets and printed bank statements. This was my territory. While Lauren had been building a personal case against me, I had unknowingly been building a financial record. "Lauren earns $200,000 a year as chief executive officer," I explained. "But our joint household expenses have exceeded her salary by roughly $60,000 annually for the past 3 years. David leaned forward. "My accounting practice brings in about $120,000 each year. I have been contributing $80,000 of that to our joint account. I kept $40,000 for business overhead and my personal needs. I thought I was helping her save for our future." I pointed to the savings account withdrawals. "But she has been pulling money from our joint savings to maintain the apartment she shares with Frank." David studied the numbers carefully. The truth was clear in black and white. While I had been living modestly and pouring most of my income into what I believed was our shared life, Lauren had been using those funds to finance her separate one. The rent for the apartment. The dinners. The weekend trips. The gifts. It had all been paid for with money I earned. "This is financial misconduct," David said bluntly. "She has been using marital assets to support an extramarital relationship while preparing for divorce. That will matter." But I was not finished. Over the weekend, I had done something that did not come naturally to me. I investigated her business affairs. What I found shocked me almost as much as the personal betrayal. "There is more," I said, sliding over another stack of documents. "Lauren has been positioning Frank to take on more authority at Meridian Technologies. But based on the corporate filings I reviewed, she appears to be exceeding her authority." David's attention sharpened immediately. "Explain." "Frank was hired 3 years ago as Vice President of Business Development. Since then, Lauren has gradually transferred executive responsibilities to him that should require formal board approval. According to the expansion plan I found in their apartment, she intends to step into the role of president, while moving him into the chief executive officer position." I paused. "But there is no record of the board approving that restructuring." Over the weekend, I had combed through publicly available filings, comparing them to the internal documents I found. Lauren and Frank's long-term vision for the company involved structural changes that would require shareholder review. Yet there was no documentation showing those changes had been formally presented or voted on. She has been operating as if she can restructure the company unilaterally, I said. The board does not know about her personal relationship with Frank. And they certainly do not know she has been implementing executive-level changes without formal authorization. David started taking notes quickly. Gerald, he said carefully, this is no longer just a divorce matter. If your findings are accurate, your wife could face serious professional consequences. I did not feel satisfaction hearing that. For 28 years I loved her. The idea of damaging her career did not bring me joy. But I also could not ignore what I had uncovered. What do you recommend? I asked. We file first, David said without hesitation. We control the narrative. We present documented facts before she frames you as the problem. He paused. And we inform the board of Meridian Technologies about potential governance violations. That afternoon, I did something that felt unnatural. For most of our marriage, I had shielded Lauren from stress, criticism, and fallout. I stopped doing that. I called Richard Hayes, the chairman of the board at Meridian Technologies. I had met him a few times at corporate events. He struck me as direct and practical. Gerald, he answered warmly. What can I do for you? Richard, I said, keeping my tone measured, I need to bring something to your attention regarding corporate governance at Meridian. It is complicated, but I believe the board should be aware of structural changes that may not have been properly authorized. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. What kind of structural changes are we talking about? Richard finally asked. I spent the next 20 minutes laying everything out carefully. I stuck to verifiable facts. I did not mention the apartment. I did not mention the affair. I kept my personal life out of it. I explained the unofficial shift in executive responsibilities. I described the expansion plans that had never gone through formal approval. I referenced the filings I had reviewed. Richard did not interrupt me once. But as I spoke, his questions became sharper. Gerald, are you telling me Lauren has been implementing major corporate restructuring without board authorization? I am saying that based on the documents available, there appears to be a significant gap between what has been happening operationally and what has been formally reported to the board. And you are bringing this to me because... I took a steady breath. Because I believe in corporate integrity. And because the board deserves to know what is being done in its name. When I ended the call, I sat back in my office chair and stared at the wall. I felt a strange combination of sadness and clarity. For nearly 3 decades I had been the man who quietly absorbed the fallout. I smoothed things over. I excused her shortcuts. I created stability so she could take risks. Now I was no longer protecting her. That evening, Lauren came home later than usual. I could see the strain on her face the second she walked in. Her composure, usually flawless, showed cracks. We need to talk, she said, dropping her briefcase harder than necessary. About what? I asked calmly. About the call Richard Hayes made to me this afternoon. About the corporate governance review the board suddenly decided to initiate. Her eyes were sharp. About the fact that my own husband is apparently trying to sabotage my career. I met her gaze without looking away. I shared factual information about corporate restructuring that appeared to lack proper authorization. Nothing more. Do not pretend you did not know what you were doing, she snapped. You knew exactly how that would land. Yes, I said evenly. I did. The same way you knew what you were doing when you spent 2 years planning my replacement. Her control slipped. This is different, she said. This impacts my professional credibility. My livelihood. Your relationship with Frank impacts that too, I replied. Especially when the board realizes you have been restructuring leadership roles in ways that benefit your romantic partner without disclosing that relationship. She stared at me, and I could see her recalculating. The version of me she had relied on for years, the quiet, agreeable husband, was gone. In his place sat someone who understood leverage. "What do you want?" she asked finally. "I want you to stop treating me like I am naive," I said. "I want you to acknowledge that your decisions carry consequences beyond your personal happiness. And I want you to understand that I am not going to quietly disappear just because that fits your timeline." She sat down across from me, her posture tight. "The board review will not find anything illegal," she said. "Operational restructuring is within executive discretion." "Perhaps," I replied. "But undisclosed conflicts of interest involving a senior executive and her romantic partner are harder to defend, especially when governance protocols were bypassed." I watched her think. For the first time since all of this began, she looked genuinely unsettled. "What would it take to make this stop?" she asked. "It does not stop," I answered. "You started this when you chose to live two separate lives. Now we all deal with what that choice created. You are destroying everything I have worked for." I shook my head slowly. "No. I am just refusing to keep covering for you." That night, she made phone calls behind closed doors. I could hear tension in her voice through the walls. And as I sat alone in the living room, I realized something fundamental had changed. For 28 years, I had been the one adjusting, the one accommodating, the one bending. Now she was the one forced to respond to consequences she could not control. It was not revenge. It was restraint. It was simply choosing not to enable someone who had betrayed me. Lauren had built her future assuming I would remain predictable. She was about to learn I was not. The next morning, I filed for divorce. But more importantly, I made a different choice. I stopped being the man who sacrificed his dignity to keep her life comfortable. After 56 years of believing that love meant bending, adjusting, and making room no matter the cost, I was finally beginning to understand something different. Sometimes love means knowing when to stop. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my new apartment, making coffee for one, and for the first time in a long while, I felt real peace in that simple act. The morning sunlight poured through windows I had chosen myself, in a place that belonged entirely to me. There was no tension in the air. No hidden life humming beneath the surface. No performance to maintain. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks earlier. In the beginning, Lauren tried to intimidate and maneuver, just like David predicted she would. But once her attorney reviewed the evidence I gathered, the apartment, the financial records, the documentation of her professional misconduct, the tone shifted. Her legal strategy changed quickly. Instead of the aggressive approach she had planned, she agreed to a far more balanced settlement. I kept the house, the one we had lived in for 20 years and largely paid for through my consistent contributions to our shared expenses. Lauren kept her retirement accounts and half of our savings, minus the funds she had used to maintain her separate life with Frank. It was fair. Not generous. Not punitive. Just fair. But what brought me the most clarity was not the financial outcome. It was watching Lauren face consequences she never expected to encounter. The governance review at Meridian Technologies was thorough. While nothing rose to the level of criminal charges, the board uncovered a clear pattern of unauthorized executive decisions and undisclosed conflicts of interest. Frank was terminated immediately once his romantic involvement with Lauren became known. His role as vice president depended on impartial judgment. A secret relationship with the chief executive officer destroyed that credibility. Lauren managed to keep her position, but just barely. She was placed on probation. Her authority was restricted. A newly appointed chief operating officer now reviewed and approved her major decisions. The woman who built her identity around autonomy and control was suddenly reporting to oversight she had not experienced since the early days of her career. Their apartment at Harborview disappeared quietly from the picture. Frank relocated to Denver and accepted a position with a smaller firm at a significantly reduced salary. Lauren moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment near her office, a noticeable step down from the lifestyle she once enjoyed. I did not learn these things directly from her. News travels in a city like ours. mutual friends, professional acquaintances, casual conversations. A few people reached out to me after the divorce, some expressing surprise, others offering quiet apologies. I had no idea. Sarah Martinez, one of Lauren's former colleagues, told me when we crossed paths at the grocery store. She made it sound mutual. Like you both just drifted apart. Nobody knew about Frank. Those conversations did something important for me. For months, I had questioned myself. I wondered whether I truly had been as lacking as Lauren described. Hearing that even her closest professional peers had been misled helped me see the broader pattern. Her ability to shape narratives extended far beyond our marriage. But the biggest change was not in Lauren's circumstances. It was in mine. For the first time in decades, I lived without the constant background noise of someone else's dissatisfaction. I had not realized how much energy I spent trying to anticipate her expectations, adjust to her moods, and fill gaps I did not fully understand. My new apartment was smaller than our house. Yet it felt bigger. Not in square footage. In freedom. I could sit in the evening and read without worrying that my contentment was somehow a sign of stagnation. I could cook a simple meal and actually enjoy it, instead of wondering whether it was impressive enough. I did not feel like I was competing with someone else's imagined future. I even started dating again, something I once believed was impossible at 56 after nearly 3 decades of marriage. Margaret was a widow I met through church. She was gentle and steady. She enjoyed long conversations about books. She appreciated quiet dinners without needing them to feel like events. Where Lauren saw my simplicity as limitation, Margaret saw it as grounding. Her affection was uncomplicated. It did not feel like something I had to earn. The strangest realization of all? I was happier than I had been in years. Lauren had been right about one thing. Something in our marriage had been over long before I admitted it. We had grown incompatible, but not the way Lauren tried to frame it. She had evolved into someone who could live 2 lives at once, accept love with one hand while betraying it with the other. I had stayed the same in the ways that mattered. I still believed in honesty. I still believed in loyalty. I still believed that when something breaks, you try to fix it together instead of secretly building a replacement. Her idea of growth meant shedding the values that built our marriage. Mine meant learning how to defend those values from people willing to use them against me. One evening in late spring, I was sitting on the small balcony of my apartment, a book open in my lap, watching the sun sink low across the buildings. The air was warm. The quiet felt earned. My phone rang. Lauren's name lit up the screen. It was the first time she had called since the divorce became official. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. There was nothing left between us that required conversation. No shared bills. No children. No loose ends. But curiosity got the better of me. "Hello, Lauren." "Gerald." Her voice sounded different. Tired. Older. "I hope I am not interrupting anything. What can I do for you?" There was a long pause. "I wanted to apologize," she said finally, "for how everything happened. For the way I handled it. I did not rush to fill the silence. I have had time to think," she continued, "about what I did. About the choices I made." Another pause. "You did not deserve what I put you through." "No," I said evenly. "I did not. I convinced myself our marriage was already finished," she went on. "I told myself I was just acknowledging reality. But the truth is, I ended it long before I admitted that to myself. I ended it when I decided you were not enough anymore instead of working with you to build something better. I found that I was genuinely curious, not angry." "What brought this on?" I asked. She let out a breath that might have been a humorless laugh. "Losing everything I thought I wanted," she said. "Frank and I lasted 6 weeks after he moved to Denver. Turns out what we had was more about secrecy and excitement than about actually living a life together." "I am sorry to hear that," I said. "Are you?" she asked, and she sounded honestly unsure. I considered it carefully. "Yes," I answered. I am sorry you threw away 28 years for something that was not real. I am sorry you hurt people chasing something that did not exist. And I am sorry you realized too late that what we had actually mattered. She was quiet for a moment. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had just talked to you? She asked. If I had been honest about feeling restless instead of creating that entire deception? Sometimes, I admitted. But the issue was never that you wanted more. It was that you chose dishonesty over communication. You chose to replace me instead of facing me. I know that now, she said softly. Do you? I asked. Because even now, your regret sounds centered on how things turned out for you. Not on what it cost me. The silence stretched. You are right, she said finally. I am still making it about myself. Yes, I replied gently. You are. I hope you are happy, Gerald, she said. I hope you found someone who appreciates what I was too selfish to value. I did, I told her. Her name is Margaret. She is honest. She is kind. And she loves without manipulation. That is good, she said quietly. You deserve that. When the call ended, I stayed on the balcony and watched the last of the light fade from the sky. A year earlier, I had been living inside a lie I did not even know existed. I was married to a woman who was carefully planning my exit while telling me she loved me. Now I lived alone, but I was not lonely. I was beginning again, but not from nothing. I had learned that contentment is not weakness. That loyalty is not foolishness. That trust, even when it leaves you vulnerable, is still a strength when given to the right person. Lauren saw my satisfaction with a quiet life as proof I lacked ambition. Margaret sees it as proof that I know how to appreciate what is real. The difference was never in what I offered. It was in who was receiving it. As I got ready for bed that night, I realized something that would have shocked the version of me from a year ago. I was grateful. Not for the pain. Not for the betrayal. But for the clarity. Lauren's deception forced me to step out of a marriage that was quietly draining my spirit. For years I had tried to measure up to standards that were never clearly defined. I lived with the constant fear of disappointing someone who had already decided I was temporary. Now I wake up beside someone who values my steadiness instead of resenting it. Someone who sees my honesty as something rare. Someone who does not come with conditions, deadlines, or backup plans. At 56, I learned that sometimes the worst loss becomes the door to freedom. Sometimes what feels like devastation is actually deliverance. Lauren was right about one thing. We both deserved partners who truly understood us. She needed someone who thrived on the same ambition and risk she did. And I needed someone whose love was steady, straightforward, and real. As I turned off the lights in my small, honest apartment, I felt something I had not felt in years. I felt at home.